Welcome to Bloom Today. We have a strengthening show for you. We're going to be talking about becoming an ex-victim.
Hi, I'm Paula Wallace, president of Bloom in the Dark, and this is
Ginny Priz, the single-handed serenity coach. Welcome to Bloom Today, where we talk about internal and external brokenness and how you can heal,
so that you can use the fertilizer of your past to bloom today. Hey everybody, today we are talking about becoming an ex-victim, and we love the ex-victim thing so much because I wear a shirt that says ex-victim every single show.
I thought you were going to say day there for a second.
Not quite. I do wear other clothes sometimes.
We don't stop being an ex-victim no matter what clothes we're wearing. And just because I'm not wearing an ex-victim t-shirt doesn't mean that I'm not an ex-victim.
Because you are an ex-victim, but you let me wear it so I don't have to worry about wardrobe ideas when it comes to
There are benefits to these things, yes.
But I do love the fact that when I wear it, I can say, been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
Exactly.
Because that is an awesome thing, and there's a lot of questions as to what an ex-victim is or what it means, and we're just saying we're identifying where we've been, and that we're not there anymore. So
praise God for that.
Isn't that amazing? And like as an ex-wife just says you were a wife, and now you're not. So ex-victim says I was a victim, I own it, I acknowledge it, I'm not in denial about it. But I'm not one anymore. I have worked for healing and growth and change so that I can then use that part of my past, the fertilizer of our past, as we call it.
Yes.
Actually use that to help other people. So then I'm an ex-victim who can have that as a badge of honor that what Satan tried to do to destroy me didn't work. And that I'm not one anymore, and I'm moving into the blooming part of the discussion.
Or of our story, right? We don't have to have the shame anymore. There's no shame associated with it for me anymore. No. Yeah, this happened, and yes, I put myself in some interesting situations, and yes, I actually, in my case, I took on the identity of victim after a while. It just became something that I was, something that I expected, and so I sort of allowed it to continue. Every work situation that I was in, every friendship, every romantic relationship, I found some way to find myself as the victim. I just could not stand up for myself. So instead, I just said, well, here I am again, being hurt. Here I am again, under someone else's thumb. Here I am again. And I didn't even consider speaking up to someone. But because of that, I really identified without using the term victim in my mind. That's not how I saw myself, but that's really what I was and what I saw myself as at the core of it once I finally got some perspective on it later on in life.
When you come out of denial?
Oh, yeah. Yes. The shades of denial, they came off.
And that makes such a difference. And so many times people are so scared of the perpetual victim or being identified with shame. Right. That they stay in denial about the realities of having been a victim.
Right.
And then they're owning the blame and shame of it, and then they're not healing from it. And so recognizing that being a victim is not your fault.
Amen to that.
It's a perpetrator or the person who is doing the harm. It is their fault, their responsibility, but owning the fact that it's a broken place in your life.
Right.
So that you can then take steps towards changing and healing and growing and becoming healthy instead of that brokenness.
Coming out of denial was a big part of that process for me. But then forgiveness also became a big part of that process for me to say, okay, I'm no longer holding everyone accountable for making me the victim, 16 times over. It's not because they weren't guilty. And in my case, sometimes they weren't actually guilty. It was just my perception of things. But there were clear cases of abuse where it's not my fault. But in order to come out of that mindset of victim and letting people take advantage of me continuously, I had to forgive them for what they had done and say, you're on God's hook, not on my hook. I'm leaving it all to him. And then I could finally walk away from underneath that identity.
Yeah, and I knew what I said to two people who had really, really, really hurt me is I said, I'm not going to let the choices you're making that cause damage, I'm not going to let those choices destroy my life. I have the choice to separate myself from the damage that you have caused. And forgiveness was the way I created that boundary. And I took it, the power of the harm they had caused out of the mix. I let it go. And that's a very difficult process, much easier said than done.
Right.
But I let it go. And then I started focusing on, now that I'm free of that, I need to focus on my healing, my growth, renewing my mind, changing, taking off the victim tattoo that was on my forehead that every perpetrator within whatever radius was constantly homing in on, she's a victim, let's hurt her. Because you can actually perpetuate this victimization and
absolutely,
and make it worse and keep attracting
not consciously,
it. No,
but
not
actually
deliberately.
Subconsciously. Yeah, you can have those. If you are still broken and operating under that, you're going to have tendencies and behaviors that.
Well, and the shame is
victims.
visible. People will
That's
notice the shame, and then the shame lets them know you're weak or broken or hurting. And then some people look for that and then take advantage.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Of hurting that. So the cool thing is we get to actually talk about 3 of the major strategies that we use in changing from being a victim. To
an ex-victim.
And everybody can use these strategies. They are universal. They're not just our secret formulas, though we use them like they're our secret.
Well, we don't want to keep them a secret. That's why we're sharing them with the world. But the first one is forgiveness, like we've been talking about, that we don't have to continue to have the past pain and abuse continue to hurt us every day, rehashing that. We can give that back to God and say, not on my watch anymore, as you were saying. I'm not going to let the pain from the past continue to hurt me.
Right, and realizing that forgiveness does not mean I have to be in relationship with the people hurting me.
Right.
Like forgiveness can mean that I let them off the hook. I separate myself from them, from the damage and harm, and give them to God. I release my bitterness, my anger about it.
Right.
I let go of all that.
But I can also protect myself
Yes.
from further abuse. I can put the right boundaries between us, and we don't have to be in close relationship, and I don't have to trust you either.
No. And it may not be safe to have any contact with. I may not ever tell that person that I forgive them or write them a letter or do anything. In fact, in my case, there has not been a way to contact a whole lot of the people who were perpetrators in my life.
Right.
But where I needed to release that was in my heart, was in my mind, was in following the forgiveness principles where Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer even, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those
who trespass against us.
And I need plenty of forgiveness, so focusing on letting go, on giving them their space so that I can then focus on what's good for me, what's healing for me and change me.
Exactly. And the second strategy that we so secretly love to employ is worship and bringing God into the equation. Now that I've put the forgiveness and I've put that at the foot of the cross, then I ask God to come into this place with me, because Ephesians 3:14-17 says, "For this reason I kneel before the Father. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith." And we actually get this strength from the Holy Spirit, from just the love that we can receive from God. And worship is one of the best ways to open our hearts and receive that from him.
Right, and to be saturated. Worship, music as a whole affects your soul. It affects your spirit, your emotions. And sometimes when I didn't know anything else to do because I was so broken and in such a dark place, I would turn worship on a loop. And worship can be anything that's glorifying God, bringing truth and life and growth into us. But in music, so much Christian music that feeds my spirit and my soul and just shifts my perspective. You know, In the Eye of the Storm is talking about being in that dramatic place of brokenness. Or
but
just
he remains in control, right?
Right. There's just so many songs. If you Google worship, that's going to give you strength. There's so much out there.
Yeah. What I love is it reminds me how God is so big and I am so small. But his love is so big and he's constantly trying to give that to me, that in that place, it's okay. You still are in every detail of my life. That's incredible. So his strength is always available for me every single moment. And that's one of the wonderful things that I love to receive from him in that time of worship.
Yeah, that makes such a difference for me. But then as the healing process continues, and obviously different levels of healing, we're many times rotating through all of this simultaneously.
Absolutely.
But the giving back, the taking that brokenness and that healing and that worship and that growth and actually sharing it with others, sharing it with other people that are maybe a little further back in that same journey of healing or growth, extending it through sponsoring like we do in Celebrate Recovery. Extending that hope and growth through storytelling, or through, in your case, writing a book, through this television show. We're getting to
give
to
back,
actively share that hope and life with others. Yeah. But it's amazing how much healing I've gotten through the process of sharing and loving on and giving in relation to this.
Yeah, there's something that happens when we go from feeling like a powerless victim to all of a sudden recognizing that we have a purpose, that we have something that we can give. And it's, again, this idea of strength, that there is something within us that is able to give back, to bloom out. And if we are connected with the Father, like the vine, that he does work through us, and we can be a part of his process, of his healing process with others as well. And it redeems some of the things that we've been through.
And it counteracts self-pity.
Oh, yes.
Because then I'm not in the poor me, poor me, poor me victim self-pity party, because it is poor me a lot of times when there's deep pain and deep brokenness. Absolutely. And whether it's health issues or emotional issues or mental issues or destructive flashbacks or whatever range of the spectrum it is so incredible that when you're sitting there giving to others, your focus is off of your own brokenness and needs and onto giving life and sharing life with somebody else. Right. It's like an antidote.
Right.
And it makes life so much better.
It does make life so much better. And a lot of times I preach to myself when I'm preaching to other people as well. So I get to receive that too.
Can you read the ex-victim poem that's in the Bloom in the Dark book?
I would be happy to read the ex-victim poem. I don't want to admit I'm a victim. Tainted by abuse, feeling irrational fear and shame. Defensive and jaded. Frigid, stoic, rude. Rejecting before I get rejected. I don't want to admit I'm a victim who is too weak to get away, to fight, to stop the pain. I stand up to the bully who killed my innocence, who massacred my soul. I don't want to be the victim, making mistakes that cause more abuse, broken choices that hurt me. I end up hurting others instead of stopping the pain. I want to stop being a victim, attracting predators, accepting abuse as my due, putting myself at risk, choosing to trust the wrong ones who just pretend to protect. Jesus, help me stop being a victim. You became a victim for me. You hung naked on the cross. You bore my shame. You were bruised for my iniquities. By your stripes, I am healed. I am no longer a victim, forgiven of sin, with wholeness of heart, redeemed, healed, and loved. My innocence restored, my soul saved. I am now an ex-victim. I testify of his grace. I was lost, but am found. I was shattered, but am restored. I am filled with relentless love. I am sharing it with others, just like me.
Yay!
One of my favorites from the book. But I think that's a great introduction as well to our guest, who is an ex-victim of physical abuse and bullying, and the founder of the Keith Edmonds Foundation.
Isn't that cool?
Keith Edmonds,
come on up.
Come join us in the kitchen?
Do you mind giving him an arm, Jenny?
An arm,
a hand,
a hand, an arm, and everything that goes with it. Here we go. Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, Keith. Thanks for coming in and sharing some of your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you know what it's like to feel like a victim.
Yeah, I do. A lot of what you guys were talking about earlier really makes me. I mean, it takes me back to a time and place that I don't live anymore. So,
and you were a victim from a very early age.
I was 14 months old. We're coming up on the 39th year of being a child abuse survivor. So,
yeah, tell us what happened.
November 18th, 1978. My mother's at the time boyfriend. My mother was single when she had me, and she was 19, looking for love in all the wrong places, and brought a guy into the home that probably shouldn't have been there. And in the middle of the night, he held my face to an electric heater, resulting in the third-degree burns and the scars and the wrath of abuse, and I had some broken legs and different things.
Wow.
But he left me on the bed, put a washcloth on my face, and left me there to die. I was in shock, obviously, by the time we got to the hospital.
Right.
Doctors didn't know for a couple of weeks if I was going to live or die because of the shock and the trauma that I went through. Knowing what I know now, God had a plan that whole time. But it took me a very long time to get to that forgiveness piece that you were talking about earlier, to understand. And then even in today, where I live today, it's still a constant act of giving forgiveness to a man that I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and he was not a part of your life after that.
No, he was part of the state penitentiary.
Yes.
After that, he spent 10 years in a state of Michigan prison.
Okay.
And I often say that I got the rest of my life to feel alone, alienated, and angry. And that was a sentence that I had for a long time, but not anymore. So,
what started the turning point process for you, where you went from that alienation to feeling like there was something different for you?
Well, in the earlier segment when you guys were talking, you were talking about living as a victim, and allowing people to do things to you and different things. And I live in a world where hurt people. So I was continuously hurting people, and it wasn't like I was purposely hurting people, but I was hurting people by my words, by my actions. Like I was a victim, but I was continuing the cycle just in a different way. I wasn't holding faces to heaters or breaking legs, but I was hurting people. And I became an alcoholic. And I like to drink early. I like to drink often. And I like to drink a lot.
Right.
And that was my way of coping with the pain. However, I didn't know that that's the reason why I was drinking for a long time. And then on my 35th birthday, I had woke up on a Sunday and I was in a world of pain. And I started drinking again to get away from the pain, because as an alcoholic, that's normally what you do.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And I got to a point where I was just looking at my life, where I was going, where I wanted to be, and where it was at. And that stuff was just all across the board. And I just said, God, if you're there, I need some help. And it was like almost instantaneously. I poured out what I was drinking, and I just kind of walked back into the house because I was sitting in my car listening to music. And that next day, life just started to change. And I think that's where I found that true forgiveness for the man that I didn't know, that was controlling my life for 34 years. And it set me on a path where, there's empowerment in saying I'm a child abuse survivor. There's empowerment in saying that I'm an alcoholic, because those things can't hurt me anymore when I say that. So it goes a long ways. It really does.
When you're healed and you're bringing that healing
in. I talked earlier about hurt people, but healthy people help people, right?
Yes.
I mean, and that's exactly where you guys are at right now with being able to share with all kinds of guests and let them be empowered.
Right. And to me, the abuse he did to you, because it was physical, because it actually harmed your face the way it did at such a young age, that set you up for bullying. That set you up for a whole lot of other damage. Right.
Yeah.
And wasn't some of the stuff you said where you hurt people, wasn't some of that just a reaction to protect yourself? Absolutely.
Absolutely was. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, right? I was a teenager in the 90s, but, I just did this thing on Facebook today. I like this page. It's called I love the 80s or whatever. And it said, type in the year that you're born in a GIF, and it'll come up with images.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I was 10 in 1987. Well, I typed that in, and Freddy Krueger popped up. Right?
Wow.
So I was 10 years old, And those are some of the names that I, growing up in that era, I looked like Freddy Krueger, and that was used against me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And Scarface and Burnt Toast Baby. I mean, all kinds of verbal abuse that I received from classmates for, again, nothing that I did.
And you had no control over what was done to you.
Right. And growing up, realizing that I look different than everybody. I mean, that's a challenge in itself when you get to 5-6 years old and you start realizing that you're a lot different than everybody else.
Well, so is she. She's like got an arm thing going on.
She's just like me.
I'm like, what's up with this? I'm feeling totally left out here. I have all my limbs and my face has no scars.
You can shave your head or something.
Yeah, there you go.
That's funny.
But seeing the healing and how that comes out when you see the brokenness in a public way, like both of y'all's is, but then you see the power behind demonstrating the healing behind that. You don't walk around going like this, hiding your face. You have a beautiful smile and your eyes light up, and that's what I see.
Yeah.
And Jenny, the same thing.
It's
the who you are that is so full of life and light. That's amazing.
Well, it's coming out of the darkness into the light, which allows that to happen. It's truly the power of Christ, of being able to say, hey, leave it at the cross and then let it go,
right?
And watch it bloom. In reality.
Exactly.
But it's been such a God thing that it's amazing.
And you've written a book.
I've written a book
about your story and your journey.
A little novella,
about a baby.
About a baby. Story of a child abuse survivor.
Awesome. Yes. And that's kind of what sparked your journey. But then shortly after that, you started the Keith Edmonds Foundation.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, what is that? What do you do with that?
In 5 years, it was September 9th, 2012 is when I came to Christ in my car and started this journey. And you have to understand that I never told my story. Like I was going to take it to my grave. It didn't matter. It had no value, all kinds of things that I believed.
Which were lies.
Right.
and then I got to a point where I was like God was putting it on me, like, you have to share your story. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's not the plan. That, the plan is that we're going to take it to the grave and we're just going to live a normal life.
Right.
And we're not going to talk about it. Because the kids in school didn't know what happened to me. I mean, it literally was, I've heard everything that they thought has happened to me.
Right.
But the reality that a man held my face to a heater when I was an infant, but since that heaviness that was put onto me about sharing my story, I began sharing it. And I got invited to go to the Mid-Atlantic Conference on Child Abuse and Neglect and be a keynote speaker. Now, that's an hour and 20 minutes of talking, and I had never shared with anybody my story before.
Oh, wow.
So it was
just dive in.
Yeah, it was
deep end.
Next thing I know, I'm on an airplane. I'm heading to Maryland to talk in this conference, and there's 500 professionals in there.
Yeah.
And I just got up there and I had a little PowerPoint and I was just like, this was my path and this is how I got to where I'm at today. And I don't even know why I'm standing here in front of you guys, but there's some value to it, I guess. But when I got done, when I walked off the stage area, I felt with conviction that this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to share this story. So I thought that I was going to go down the path of being an author and a speaker, because there's value in my story and there's value in the story of Christ and the forgiveness that comes with it. And then all of a sudden we started changing it. And as I was talking and as I was writing, I want to be known for my actions, for the little Keiths that are out there that are hurting and need the help. So then we created the Keith Edmonds Foundation, and then we started raising awareness, and we started Camp Confidence, and we started Confident Community, and we started all these things. And it's really opening me to that little kid that I was, because as hard as it is for me to believe, I know what these kids need.
Yes,
and it's a realization that I'm coming to as we continue to work. It's like all those things that I felt as that little kid, I'm able to give back. And
God
it's
is
amazing.
using that experience
it's amazing.
to breathe life into what other people have experienced.
It's truly amazing. It is. It's just unbelievable.
Right, and you couldn't do what you're doing to reach all these other little kids that are, and adults who were kids, and all the mess that goes with that, if you hadn't walked the journey. If it was just theory, we wouldn't listen to you.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of people who do have theory out there, but we know in what we do, it's the same thing. God's using that brokenness in the path we're on.
Yeah. I can tell this quick story about when we're at Camp Confidence. We have Camp Confidence here in Wilson County, Tennessee, every summer. And there's a kid, he was 10. and we had just started camp, and he's walking alongside of me in the gymnasium, and he's like, hey, my aunt told me what happened to you, told me about the story. And I said, yeah. And he said, man, nobody's held my face to a heater. That's crazy. And I said, but you want to know what's even crazier? He said, what? And I said, the power of forgiveness has allowed us to create this camp. That kid was like, oh man, that's a memory that I'll always remember from the very first Camp Confidence, is that connection. And then at the end of camp, I didn't say, I talked to them and I said, this is not see you next summer. It's see you next month. I mean, we're walking with them month after month now. And then we're leading up to Camp Confidence in 2018. And it's that time. A child spells love Time. That's the way that they spell it. That's the way I spell it even as an adult. Like if I truly am feeling connected with somebody, I want to spend time with them.
Right.
Yeah. And giving it back to the kids it's priceless. I mean, there's no dollar signs. It doesn't even matter the activity that we're doing. In one of our confident communities, we had a balloon and a fly swatter. And they play with that balloon and fly swatter for 45 minutes.
That's awesome.
And I'm standing there watching them like just chase and I was like, holy cow, it's not the activity that we're doing. It's not like we're going to a Nashville Predators game or Dollywood.
Right.
We're just spending that time.
And giving them value in doing that.
Right. And that's something I so desperately needed as a kid. I can recognize it now.
Community, connection.
It's always community. Yeah. It will always be community and spending time with kids. So it's a blessing to be able to do it. It truly is.
And we're so excited to know every place that God's using brokenness and pain and hurt that we've been through, the victim side of the equation, and pulling in that restorative blessing, help other people side, and what you're doing, and the fact that you can do it with so much authenticity because people can't look at you without seeing the heart and where you're coming from, and that desire to bless and help. It's just, it's awesome.
Well, when I started this path, it was, I was learning that, wearing it, and I'm blessed to wear it on the outside because there's a lot of us that wear it on the inside. I wear it both outside and inside, and there's a lot of hurt people that are walking around that have been through some very challenging times. That nobody knows.
That's why I wear it on a shirt.
Right. There's no indicator. You had talked about victim on your forehead. Yes. We need ex-victim on our forehead.
Yes, exactly. Keith, you know what? This is all why you are the ex-victim of the week. So we are rewarding you.
You actually get the chocolates and the tissues and the things that show that brokenness is emotional, that it feels that way.
As physical, right.
And the healing also reaches out.
Well, I do love chocolate. Dude,
awesome.
I'm a huge fan.
We do too. Clearly.
That's why we have the tissues and chocolates everywhere.
Yeah,
but
Andy's mints, I see that.
Yeah, and we're just excited that through your sharing your story, it's one more opportunity for people to see that they can use that brokenness, that pain, that hardship in their own lives. We call it using the fertilizer of our past.
Right, yeah.
To actually bloom today.
Yeah, I call it stripes where I come from.
A free PDF copy of the Bloom in the Dark book and a full list of Bloom Today's coaching tools can be found on bloomtodaytv.com. Then visit Bloom Today's Facebook group for deeper conversation.
Alpha.